This is where language, which is based in dualistic thinking, really falls apart. People sometimes speak about experiencing the self. And that's really not the case. No one ever experiences the self. You know, this is, the self is beyond experience because of the nature of it. It isn't an experience that you can't have. It isn't an experience at all. It's awareness of experience. And this is the nature of pure subjectivity. Not reducible to any object. Aware of all objects. The sense of the self, which is often associated with the feeling sensation of me, or thoughts that are arranged in such a way that presume an I in the center. Those are, in a sense, they're an illusion. In a very real way, they're an illusion. They're not true. And in another sense, they are, you could say, functional necessities. They're functional necessities in order to organize a human life. It's almost like we're demanded since childhood to assume identity as a being. Awakening is really becoming more and more, or maybe instantaneously clear about the nature of the story we tell ourselves of what we are. You know, there's a trap for some folks who awaken that they think that that story has to go away. But the one who thinks it has to go away is another part of the story. It's generated the same way a heartbeat is generated, the same way that fingernails are generated, the same way that blood flow is generated or nerve impulses are generated. The sense of having an individual I or a me feeling also are also objects of awareness, but they are, you could say, functionally legitimate. And so what awakening is seeing the nature of them as functionally legitimate. And as long as they are there, just like as long as the heartbeat is there, as long as the fingernails are there, as long as the nerve impulses are there, to live with them and use them. They're not a mistake. Even the sense of an I is not a mistake. Even the story we tell ourselves about what we are, not a mistake. But to see clearly what it is. We could go further, but this has been a half an hour, so I'll take a break here just for a moment and check in and see how you guys are. I want to hear if you have anything you'd like to share or any questions.
I just would like you to repeat something that you said toward the end when you were talking about the story we tell ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, something that just so often comes up here is the notion that the story needs to go away, and you said something about that, like it's kind of a trap, or would.
Well, you just think about it for a moment. Who would be saying the story would need to go away?
Yeah.
Is that awareness that's speaking?
The idealized self.
The very self
Yeah.
that is supposedly needing to go away is the one that's saying the self needs to go away.
Yeah.
The very mind
Yep.
that is speaking as a individual person who owns a body or some
I
such.
get that it's an object.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a snake wanting to eat its tail. I mean, it's this thing where the very one, I mean, you could say it this way, either there's silence or there isn't.
Okay.
There are moments in which the individual I drops away and is absolutely silent. And when that's the case, there's no problem because there's no one to speak about such things. But as soon as there's a thought that says, oh, I'm here, what's wrong? I should be gone. That itself it's asking for its own not being. So that's also not a problem at all.
Yeah.
You could say it any number of ways. One way of saying it is that to be absolutely compassionate to the one that you take yourself to be in those moments. If you take yourself to be an individual self who needs to let go,
Yeah.
well, then relax and let go. If you're still there, then relax with being still there. This thing of wanting to be different, wanting to control things that are outside of our control. It really makes no sense, even just rationally, just looking at it directly.
Yeah.
Like we don't have any control over whether a thought arises or whether an I sense arises. Now, of course, to say we don't have any control, now I'm speaking about the very thing that we're wishing would dissolve. So it's really, you could say in some ways it's just seeing this. There's really nothing to do. It's seeing it. And it's also a validating of what is actually the case. Not arguing with what is arising, not arguing with reality.
Exactly.
You know, like for some folks, not everybody, for me though, it is useful to, when there is the sense of an individual I, and this is very traditional. This is in traditional Advaita Vedanta, but it's not often taught when people teach Advaita in the States or in the West. But it's very, very traditional way of speaking. That what is appropriate for an individual I when it's arising, that knows through insight and maybe from prior experience, if we can speak that way, because once there's an individual I, then we have a past, then we have a future, then we have memory. And to speak that way, the traditional way is for you to, because there's an I, to assume that there's an intelligence, you can call it the intelligence of the universe, that is greater than you, that decides when thought of an I or the feeling and sense of an I is there and when it's not, because it's certainly not in your control. You could say the intelligence of the universe, and traditionally speaking, it's called Ishvara or the Lord.
Yeah.
Advaita Vedanta. The Lord of the universe. And the word Lord there, Ishvara, literally means controller, because you're not in control. That's clear. Because if you were, you wouldn't exist. If you were in control, you go, okay, I want to go into instant samadhi where there's no I. Click, choom, gone, done. But that doesn't happen, right? Even if you
Right.
have the insight. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. So the fact that sometimes it doesn't means that there's an I sense. And when there's an I sense, it's appropriate to project that I sense onto others. Yeah, others exist.
Yeah.
Conversations with them when there's an I sense. You have a spouse or you don't have a spouse, or you have friends or you don't have friends. All of that is there with the I sense. And so to attribute the I sense to the intelligence of the universe, not that like so many religious people, oh, I know this is true or that. No, but that there's some primal intelligence, the controller, the Lord, the goddess, God, whatever word you want to use, and you surrender to them until that time in which the controller swallows that I, and then there's no controller and no I. Then there's no Ishvara and no Jiva, or no soul and no God. This is the traditional way of speaking in Advaita Vedanta. Somehow, I think God is getting a bad rap in the West because of all the ways in which we've been controlled by religion and things like that. So it's usually when people discover like non-dual teachings, they're like, finally, I'm beyond that bully of a God. So now I can be without that. Not everybody. Many people feel very warmly towards God too, but some people don't. So in order to make the teaching more universal, there's very little talk about God when people talk about Advaita in the West. But there's plenty of talk. If you read Ramana Maharshi, you hear about God all the time. My own teacher, Papaji, you hear about God all the time. Shankara, you could say the highest sage known authority who started the Advaita tradition as a tradition itself. I mean, it was around before that, but he's the guy. 700 AD or somewhere around there, 600 AD. He spoke about God all the time, Ishvara, all the time. And he also said, yes, ultimately, Ishvara is not real. Ultimately, the body's not real. Ultimately, you're not real. So if you're in a state in which you don't see anything but the self, and there's no one saying that because only the self is there in silence, a la Ramana Maharshi, fine. There's no God then, and there's no individual I either. But as soon as the individual I arises, it's absolutely appropriate to say, oh Lord, okay, as long as you decide that there should be an I arising, I'm surrendered to that. I have no choice. You're in control. I'm not in control. I'm not in control of what arises in the field of awareness, of who walks in the door. I'm in control of nothing. It's all in your hands. And that automatically dips you into the place.
Yeah.
Because you see, Ishvara, in this way of talking, the Lord, the controller, has absolutely no problem with non-duality. Loves is non-duality, is in non-duality, is not going to stand in the way of both of you dissolving into Brahman, into the unspeakable. So God is no obstacle in this way. Does this make sense?
Oh, yeah, Krishna. Totally. Really helpful.
Very good.
And a reminder.
Very good. Yeah. Wonderful, Evelyn. Thank you.
Thank you.